was talking.
You are now live, sir.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Again, let's call Public Works and Utilities Committee for July 25th, 2022 to order. Have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz.
Councilor Chavez? Here. Councilor Michael Garcia?
Present.
And Chairman Rivera.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thanks. And for the record, Councilor Romero Worth as well as Councilor Lee Garcia are excused. Next is approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
No changes from staff, Mr. Chair.
All right. What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second, we have a motion for approval and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda. Any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right. Anything the committee would like to pull?
Move to approve consent.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
You guys don't have anything to pull? All right. I did want to pull item C, just for a couple of questions. So with that, I'll move for approval as amended.
Second.
Motion for approval in a second. Any further discussion? None, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. Next, we're on to approval of the minutes from July 11th, 2022. Any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Any changes from the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval in a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Seeing none, motion carries. We're on to presentation informational items. Ms. Diaz, will you read this into the record?
Wastewater management update, staffing and future planning. This is Michael Dozier's Wastewater Division Director's item.
Thank you, Mr. Dozier. And was it Councilor Romero Worth that asked for this information? Councilor Garcia, okay. Thank you.
So, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Today, I'm going to give an update, but I'm actually going to let a few of my newer employees that we've gotten this previous year give the update. One of them will be Mr. Martinez. I'm not sure if all of you have met him yet. Xavier, he's our admin manager. And the other will be Fred Heerbrand. He's our engineering manager. And with that, I'll allow them to come up and start giving their presentations, and I will also be here if we have any questions at the end.
Thank you. Is it Xavier or Javier?
Thank you, Mr. Dozier. I go by either. But I primarily go by Javier, but Xavier is fine as well. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Javier Martinez. I am the administrative manager for the wastewater department. I've been with the department now for a little bit over 6 months. So I don't think I'm getting my feet wet anymore, but I get the gist of the job pretty much. And I'd like to kind of give a quick presentation. I don't have a slideshow or anything, but just primarily what we're doing in the department as far as getting staff on board. I'd like to give a little update that we're going to be having a rapid hire event this coming Saturday, July 30th at the Genoveva Chavez Center from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. I want to give recognize our director, Mr. Jones, for spearheading this and getting it all together with, along with our HR department that has been a great source of support to get this done. You know, as we know, we're having a lot of vacancies to fill, and we're having some challenges in getting those filled. I got to give an update in my 6 months here with the department. I've scheduled and overviewed multiple applications, over 30 applications, scheduled interviews. A lot of the times we have no-shows, we have no return calls. Out of those 30 interviews that we've had, we've maybe brought on to the department 5% new hires. The others have been internal hires to move up and of course, to get promotions, which that's good within internal department moves to make sure that we keep the historical knowledge within our facility and our plant. Like I say, that's the primary thing that I'm working on is with working with HR to get our positions filled. It's a timely and some yet tedious kind of process, I guess. Working hand in hand with HR, they go through the rigorous timeframe of screening all applications that come in, and they filter down to us. It is my job to get those eligibles to interview, to coordinate interviews, of course, with hiring committees, go through their applications, go through their qualifications, contact their references to make sure that these individuals have a good background, sturdy background that we want to hire in these positions that, for the city. And a lot of times it's challenging. But again, I want to take the time and thank everyone. Welcome me here to the city of Santa Fe. It's a great job. It's a great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome. Do we have any questions for Javier? How many vacancies do you have in your area, I guess?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, so right now we're about 30% down, so we have roughly about 17 vacancies. When we're fully staffed, we're roughly about 60 employees. Right now, we're about 41, 42. So a lot of these are multiple positions of the same job description, primarily waste operators and collection operators. So waste operators are the ones that maintain the facility there, and the collection are the ones that go out into the street and maintain our lines. So those are the biggest vacancies that we have. So.
You'll provide the training once people are hired to get their qualifications and do all that?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. So we provide the on-the-job training for new hires that come in, and then we provide study material to make sure that when they are qualified or deemed ready by the state to go and test to achieve and get their higher wastewater levels, the city pays for them to go and take this test. Once they acquire their levels, and it's a process, so they have to work in the field the minimum of 1 year of experience in the field before they can test for each level. So if we have an apprentice coming in July 1st, they'll have to work a whole 12 months on the job. Then we'll have to have the supervisor or anybody that's overseeing them to justify that their training is valid, their on-the-job training is valid to proceed, and then we can submit the application for them to take their test for level 1 and so on and so forth. So as you all know, the facility requires, and our licensing by the state requires, that we must have a level 4 operator on site 24/7. We are shorthanded in that level, so we encourage and try to blossom, I guess, our new employees, encourage them to move up and advance their careers, because it's a win-win for the employee and for the city if we foster them to grow in their field to provide the service to the city.
Great, thank you, and good luck with the rapid hire.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to break in real quick to just say Javier is actually one of the ones that we got in a rapid hire, the previous one we did. So hopefully we can have good odds the same this year.
I know he came from Espanola, so call all your friends up and yeah, everyone is, it seems like.
All right, so now Fred Herbrandt, he'll start with the presentation.
Yes, sir.
difficulties of using someone else's computer.
To give you a little review of wastewater treatment, a little bit of review of some improvements we've done at the plant in the last couple of years, and what we plan to do to improve the plant in the next couple of years. Why do we treat wastewater? Protect the rivers and streams, quality, organisms that live in those rivers and streams. Also prevents disease like cholera, yellow fever, dysentery. These diseases aren't common in the United States because we do treat wastewater here. Treating wastewater, we generally use naturally occurring bacteria as well as sedimentation to remove various pollutants from the wastewater so that we can release it to the stream and it's non-toxic. These are just some examples of the common biology that we use to treat wastewater. There's rotifers up in the upper right-hand corner, ciliates on the upper left-hand corner, a nematode right below that, bacteria, stalk ciliates, there's a water bear there. All of these microorganisms eat the pollutants that are in the wastewater that we can't settle out. Then they reproduce. That's what generally sludge is, these microorganisms. And then we can settle out the microorganisms and remove them from the water so that we're discharging them. This is an example of our treatment system. We start with collected from the homes. We screen out non-organic materials, remove grit, which is basically sand and other high-density materials. Goes through an aeration basin where it contacts with the bacteria. Then the clarifiers settle out the bacteria, separate the clear water. Goes through an additional physical filtration and UV disinfection before it's discharged to the stream. And then we take the solids, put them in an anaerobic digester where we produce methane and also reduce the volume of sludge so we have less to get rid of. And then we dewater it, and most of it ends up as compost. Some of it we have to haul to the landfill. Recent improvements at the plant. We're almost completed with the anaerobic digester project. This project added 2 new digester units with floating covers. Inside of these digester units, basically bacteria eats bacteria under conditions where there's no oxygen. That produces methane. We collect the methane on the floating cover, and our plan is eventually we'll burn that in a generator and generate electricity to offset our carbon footprint. We also did an aeration improvements project. This particular project will also save us energy because it'll use automatic valving systems in the aeration piping as well as dissolved oxygen and ammonia sensors within the tanks themselves so that we only have to aerate to add as much oxygen to the tanks as we need. We don't have to use excess energy. Of course, that saves energy. We also added a equalization basin which collects the water that comes through our belt filter presses where we press water out of our sludge. We do that because there's a high amount of ammonia in that wastewater. We don't want to add it all into the system at one time. So by putting it in a tank, we can feed it slowly. And that helps the biology because people don't like large changes at one time. Same thing with the funds. Upcoming projects. We just completed the review of the RFPs for our master plan. Our last master plan was in 2016, so we're due to do another plan. This plan will look minutely at the next 5 years and what we need to do to improve the plant in the next 5 years, and it'll also look out 20 years for our long-range plan. Preliminary and primary treatment rehab project. This is what we refer to as the headworks. It's the physical screening that we do of the wastewater when it comes into the plant. There's initially screens that remove any type of inorganic material from Q-tips to cigarette butts to toilet tissue. It all gets screened out there. We also remove grit, which is more or less sand, seeds, anything that settles very quickly. And then we have primary clarifiers that follow the grit removal. Anything that'll settle in a relatively short period of time is collected in these primary clarifiers and pumped back to the digesters where they're digested. We'll replace most of that equipment as part of this project, as well as rehab the building that houses much of that equipment because it's been there for 20 years. This is a very corrosive and toxic atmosphere in the building because of the raw sewage coming into it. There's hydrogen sulfide, there's methane, a lot of toxic gases which affect the interior of the building over time. We also plan to replace our ultraviolet disinfection equipment. The equipment we have right now is probably 30 plus years old. Manufacturer does not make replacement parts. We need to replace it before we run out of extra parts that we have. So we're gonna have to issue an RFP for design of the facilities, and then we'll go into a construction project to replace it, as well as adapt the building get the new equipment. We also plan to try a different method of composting. Right now we use the windrow method, which relies on diffusion of air into the compost in order for the bugs that are in the compost, which do the work, in order for them to breathe, it has to naturally diffuse into the pile. With static pile composting, pile the compost over top of an aeration system, and you can either blow air in or suck air through the pile. That way you don't have to mix the pile stays in one place, you get better distribution of air through the pile, and actually there are some regulatory benefits using this method because you don't have to keep your temperature as a constant the same amount of time. Take a look and see if we can utilize some of that to increase our output of compost. As you've seen, most of what we're trying to do down at the plant is to turn the waste we receive into something beneficial. Whether that's treated wastewater, irrigation, compost, or soil amendment, or energy. Questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation and appreciate it. I know you talked about equipment that we're going to be needing to implement, such as the UV. What are that type of equipment costs? And have we begin to prepare a budget for it?
A lot of it depends on what system you go with. Even the number of bulbs required changes depending on the type of bulbs that are in the system. The system that we're considering for our facility, just the equipment itself, I would guess is somewhere in the range of $2.5 million. And then whatever changes we would have to make in the infrastructure there to fit that equipment, because equipment is arranged a little different. Equipment we have currently, we may need some extra depth in our channels, and that would require some concrete.
Roughly, do you know how much that might cost? I mean,
For the total project,
yeah.
I would put a budget number on that, and when I say budget number, it are probably plus or minus 100%, because I really don't know what modifications need to be made. So I would guess we're looking at somewhere around 5 to 6 million.
Mr. Jones, have we begun to plan for that? Because that's not a small chunk of change. That's a huge investment.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, it is part of our planning process, and there's multiple avenues that we look at, including cash reserves that wastewater continues to have. I believe the aeration project was funded with reserve cash, as opposed to the anaerobic digester was a green bond that was issued. So also bonding is a way, and we also have applications in with organisms like the State of New Mexico Environmental Department's Clean Water Fund. I believe our Headworks project is an application for that funding.
It's a sewer line repair project is applied funding from the state revolving fund for $2.3 million. That application.
And then, of course, applications for things like, federal infrastructure money. So we do keep a wide variety of funding available. We work with our financial consultants, Jason Lum who's been our financial consultant for many years, our finance team, for each project to take it individually and see how does that fit within a long-range financial plan. But several different avenues that we look for funding, and we try to match those with the appropriate projects.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And I guess, given we see the need, given we have different buckets of money we could potentially pull from, do we have a timeline for the implementation of the project? Because I'd hate for us to be in a position where we run out of parts and we're in a jam, so to speak. And so do we have a timeline for the implementation of this new project?
Have prepared the RFP for the design work by a consultant engineer. That's being reviewed by finance right now. So I'm hopeful that will be out. Proposals in August, probably later in August. Probably take about 2.5 to 3 months to get through the review process in that period. And then design itself would probably take 6 to 9 months, 9 months. Depends on how much physically needs to be changed with the facility. Then we'd be ready to go for the construction project. Construction project, I would estimate at 12 to 18. So you're probably, from today, you're probably looking 2 years
To completion of the project.
from RFP to these projects are typically over 7
One last question. I know, and I haven't heard about it, so I guess this is a two-part question. We've had challenges in the past with our digesters, which have limited access to water for folks. Have we had any challenges recently? Do we think all the challenges are behind us?
constant challenges. I don't know if all of our challenges will ever be behind us. You would need me and all your challenges. face challenges because what comes to us always changes, it's never the same. And the composition of the waste affects everything through the process. So you always lose something like that, and there's always equipment failure. We have redundant systems throughout the treatment plant. It still happens.
Okay.
It fails and you don't have the replacement equipment.
Okay, and I guess the second part to that was, I can't put a specific date on when the last time the digesters went down. I know we got alerted to it. Has the digesters been malfunctioning, limiting access to water within the last 6 months?
So the digesters have not. We did have a issue not too long ago that we did have to shut off some of the reusers, but it was related more to Mother Nature. So some of the foam that was on top of our clarifiers was getting through because of its foam. It hangs out on the top. All the rains mixed it all into it, and we went pretty much a whole weekend that we couldn't give any water to the reusers, but that has subsided already, and we've pretty much got the foam off now. Part of the aeration project was helping remove that issue because we actually have skimmers that can take the foam off, and we've little by little been taking it off lately these past few weeks. And let me see, I'll go back to this picture. So the darker brown you see on top of the basins, so that's pretty much all gone. There's a little bit on the sides where the skimmers are at, and we've just been taking it off little by little. The previous weeks when the rain did mix it all in, there was probably about a maybe 6-inch layer around the whole basin, and since then we've got it completely off of there. We're not having that issue anymore.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Dozier. With that, I don't have any other questions. I know that we've talked about it in the past as a committee, taking site visits too, such as the wastewater treatment plant, the reservoirs, et cetera. I don't know, Mr. Chair, are we still in line for that, or?
Typically, we have meetings out at the site and then do a quick tour, but because of the hybrid and having people physically at a location and having to YouTube it, that's a little bit more of a challenge. But one suggestion, I think, from the directors were that we could have our meeting here and then either drive out to the facility or drive up to the reservoir, or even take a van or get shuttled up to the reservoir. So still thinking about it, trying to figure out what the best way to do it is.
Great. Well, look forward to
Councilor Garcia, we could also do, if you just wanted to go out and get a tour, you can send me an email, give me a call, and we can set that also up individually if you'd like.
Okay. I think it'd be good for us as a group, as a committee, to kind of take it all in together, so to speak. Thank you for the clarification, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. No other questions.
If you have a second, I'll just introduce myself a little.
Sure.
I just moved here in October. My wife, I was consulting engineer on so I'm very passionate. I have a lot of experience. I work as a consultant. I work with a lot of different facilities. A lot of I was the guy that we're hiring to do the
Well, welcome to Santa Fe. Welcome to the city. Great to have you.
No, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for introducing us to some of your staff. Appreciate that. We're on to item C, which I pulled. Will you read that into the record, please, Ms. Diaz?
Request for approval of a year-end fiscal year 21-22 budget amendment resolution to address projected budget deficits in the police, fire, and emergency management departments.
Thank you, Andy, for hanging around. So the other year-end bar was introduced and then is going to council on Wednesday. Was this one introduced at a different committee?
Mr. Chair, this was not introduced at a committee because it's not a resolution, it's not legislation, it's just a bar. It is included in the other one as part of the year-end resolution, but there was, it's a bit of an abbreviated process for this one because this is we're kind of up against two deadlines. We have to figure out where we're going to be short at the year end, but then we have very little time to put together any addressing bars or other documentation to actually address it. And this was the only one that was big enough to actually require council attention individually as a bar item.
All right, so you have listed on page 2, I guess, expenditures, and the first one is overtime, and there's an increase, and then the rest are decreases. Is this, I think it works opposite in the accounting world, is that true? Increases or decreases, and decreases or increases? Or are these actually the way they're supposed to be?
No, it's actually showing the way it's supposed to be. Fire is running short on overtime. If you see on the next page, you see there's another area in fire where we're also short on overtime. And I'll note that isn't 100% overtime. It's just overtime was the largest category. One of the other, that's the biggest factor by far, because as you know from your time as fire chief, I'm sure, a lot of the overtime usage is not at the discretion of the department. It is written into the union contract. And so with illnesses and everything too coming up, that, you know, the department has very little discretion over how much overtime it uses. One other minor factor in overages as well in police and fire is the timing of retirements. We have really no way of budgeting ahead of time for retirement payouts because there's just no way to predict who is going to retire, when they're going to retire, how much leave they will have when they retire. We just count on hoping it comes out in the wash, but there's just really, you know, any attempt we made to budget it would just be a complete shot in the dark. You know, just absolutely, you know, no way to educate a guess on that. But that's a minor issue compared to the overtime issue. Really, the overtime is the big issue, and as you know, Mr. Chair, from your time leading that department, that's an ongoing, long-standing issue with public safety.
Yeah, okay, so in this case, you're pulling from all these other funds to increase the overtime budget for police and fire. So you're taking from other departments that I guess had end of year balances?
Correct. All of these places we're pulling through from are within the community health and safety department, but they include community services, and they're largely pulling from community services and recreation, where we are projecting to see balances left over at the end of the year. And all of this is in an attempt to avoid or at least minimize any possible audit findings from these org codes going over budget.
So my main question is the GCC, pulling from GCC, which is an enterprise fund and typically is subsidized by the city because it never makes enough to fully operate. So why are we taking from here when they're an enterprise fund?
Mr. Chair, what we are doing is we are cutting back on the subsidy. So we are recognizing savings in GCC that's largely resulting from you know, the facility being closed a little bit longer than we thought. There were some issues with the pool and other things that caused it to facility usage to be down versus what it was projected to be. And by reducing the GCC budget, again, based on projected, we're not going to be shorting them or cutting hours or doing anything like that. This is just projected savings at year end. And then we're able to subsidize them less from the general fund and use that general fund subsidy instead to cover the deficits in fire and police.
All right, so we're still gonna have to subsidize them though?
Yes, there is still a subsidy in there, but it's much, much smaller for FY '22. There is pretty much a subsidy in there every year. For the current FY '23, there is again a subsidy to GCC.
All right, I'm sure there's a reason, but why not keep that money there and not subsidize it all? And take the money directly from where you would subsidize and give it to fire?
Well, Mr. Chair, in a normal year, GCC does use that subsidy and does need that subsidy. It was just because of an extraordinary confluence of factors this year that GCC had lower operating costs because of unplanned facility closures that I'm sure you know about even better than I do. There was the problems with I believe the problem with the HVAC, closed the facility for a bit. There was a problem with the natatorium that they had to replace some major equipment with. So that reduced that caused some, I don't know if they were full-time facility closures, but that did cause some closures of areas of the facility, which again, it was basically an unintentional savings because of that. They didn't close it on purpose or want the equipment to break down on purpose to save money. It just worked out that way.
All right, thank you. That was my main question, was about GCC and trying to figure out how that whole thing was working out. So, any other questions, Councilor Garcia?
One, why isn't this going to finance, given the fiscal matter and on the schedule for them?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, it was my original plan and intent to take it to finance. On the determination of the city attorney was that because the legislation had to be introduced and because we have a very tight deadline to get all of this approved and sent to DFA by July 31st, because the long lead time of committee approval process, it was just not possible to take it as a separate item to finance.
My second question is, there's $500K in here for police overtime. Last I saw, hovering around 22% vacancy rate. Why couldn't the savings from the vacancy salaries be utilized towards this $500,000 of overtime?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, it was indeed used. We did use a substantial portion of vacancy savings to cover this. This is the amount that was not able to be covered by existing vacancy savings.
So what I'm hearing is that because this could really put us in a tough spot for future fiscal planning, where we're utilizing all of the vacant salaries and we're still countering $500,000 in overtime. That is a concern. I think that's where Chief Joy needs to be able to come in and give us the plan as we're working towards fully staffing that department and how that is going to impact overtime and future planning, because as we fully open, there might not be opportunity to pull from GCCC or any of these other departments, and again, we put ourselves in a worse fiscal position. So
correct. And if I could just note, Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, there is an inverse relationship between the two. The higher police vacancies go, the more overtime has to be used to provide coverage. So there is an inverse relationship. As we are hopefully able to get police closer to full staffing, the overtime number will go down. But in a case like we're seeing right now, where we have an extraordinarily high number of vacancies, overtime usage is going to skyrocket. And that's the worst situation we want to be in. I mean, obviously, the Chief Joy would tell you that's the situation he does not want to be in, because obviously overtime is much more expensive than just having a regular time officer on duty. So it's just kind of an inevitable situation of the, resulting from the low staffing levels at police.
Understandable, but I think that it'd be good to, I think just for the public to be aware of how much overtime is really being encumbered by the city, because that 500,000 is what we weren't able to cover. So what is the number we were able to cover using the existing salaries? Lump that up with this $500,000 to give an actual overtime salary number. I'd be interested in that, how much we're the city's encumbering every year, or with this past year requesting overtime. I completely understand the logic behind, once we bring on more staff, there's going to be less overtime. It's kind of a catch-22, because when we bring on more staff, we'll have more, we're supposed to have more officers on beat as well, because I think the number we've been consistently told is there's about 8 on duty at any given time when we need 12. Well, once we hit that 12, does that mean we're never going to see overtime again? I don't think that's going to be the situation. So I think that's where I'd ask for Wednesday to have a little more information, just that we can plan and have Chief Joy plan to prepare as we do everything we can to have him fully staffed, get you and your team to figure out the financial needs behind everything, because I don't want us to be in a situation next summer where we're potentially fully staffed, we didn't anticipate it, we've got this overtime, and we're picking and pulling from these various departments to cover the overtime. I think now is the time where this, to me, as from the fiscal perspective, is a red flag that, hey, we need to keep an eye on this, and put the actual number of dollars to the police overtime, the 5, in addition to the 500,000. I think with fire, they're fully staffed. I think just the need is there. We need to check with Chief Moya to see if that's different. But with police, it's different because we've got the lower vacancies. As we want to raise, how do we work to adjust to make sure, again, we next year don't have you in front of us, Mr. Hopkins, saying, hey, we're going to pull from here because we didn't plan on this.
And Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, I would say that this is, again, an extraordinary situation. We do not bring bars like this very often. It was just kind of a combination of factors that led to this situation. And you're correct. I mean, if we were fully staffed in police, there would still be overtime for special events. There is some written into the contract, a certain amount of overtime written into the contract, you know. So we can plan for those, and police has gotten pretty good about planning for those, but when they do have a pretty high vacancy rate, as they have had this past year, then, you know, they're kind of in a catch-up situation where they have to have a certain amount of officers on duty, they have to have a certain number of captains, a certain number of shift supervisors, and so, you know, I have some friends in the police department, and they would love to have more time with their families, but, you know, it's just, that's just kind of the way that it is, that, you know, oh God, I gotta go out and cover this DWI patrol, or I gotta cover this traffic patrol because we're so short-staffed, you know, so we're hoping, but I will get with the police department and see if I can get them to come up with some numbers before Wednesday on historic overtime usage and, you know, focusing on the last year.
I think those conversations can be had offline. It's just that way we can give Chief Joy all the tools he needs as he's beginning to look and plan for next year's budget. It's all about planning for us. With that, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. I appreciate it. No other questions, Mr. Chair?
All right, since I pull this, I'll move for approval. A motion for approval and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any abstentions, any nays? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. That's the only item pulled, so no action items for discussion. Any matters from staff? Director Wheeler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two items from Public Works staff today. The first one is that Ramela Glorioso Moss is going to give the committee an update on big road construction projects that are about to go to construction. So one of them is of great interest to you. And then the second one is I just wanted to note that the ICIP, the request of the legislature for our capital funding this year, will be introduced on Wednesday at the governing body meeting, and that list is posted in PrimeGov along with some details. Wanted to invite you to take a look at that, and maybe we could speak in advance if you'd like to, Chairman, and let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. I'd be happy to give you some more insight into that. It's a result of our ongoing capital planning that we do year-round, listening to priorities from the governing body, from constituents, from the legislature, and we think that it represents that, but we'd be really happy to have your feedback on that, so it's available for your review. And with that, I'll let Ramela give you an update on the projects.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I just want to give you a quick update on the 3 roadway and trails projects that are going to construction this fall. The first one is the Guadalupe Street reconstruction project. We received the funding agreement for $10.2 million last week, and it will go through approval process, beginning with the Finance Committee next week. This funds is from the federal government, 100% funded by the federal government. So we are going to submit the final plans for NMDOT approval on Friday, and we are anticipating to receive the notice to proceed from NMDOT in early August. And as soon as we receive that, we bid out the project. And we anticipate to begin construction mid-October. The same thing with Cañada Rincon Trail. We will submit the plans for, final plans for NMDOT approval on Friday, and hoping to receive the notice to proceed, so it's the same situation. But the Cañada Rincon Trail will take only 4 months to construct, while the Guadalupe Street reconstruction will take 1 year to construct, weather permitting. The third project is the Agua Fria South Meadows Intersection Improvements Project. We're down to negotiating with 2 property owners to acquire right-of-way, and that we anticipate to begin construction late October to early November. That's all. Thank you.
You have all the funding for that one as well, Ramela?
All the projects are fully funded.
All right. And how long will that one take to complete?
The Agua Fria South Meadows will take about 6 months to complete.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for the update. Great news. Any questions for Ramon? Thank you.
No question. I guess I have a question for Director Wheeler. Can we still add potential projects to that?
Yes, you can, Chairman. Councilor Garcia, yes, now is a good time. Our deadline for submitting the final list to DFA is August 18th, so as we go through this process, it's a great time to add things. So you can call me or email me, and I can help you add anything you'd like.
Perfect. I'll work with you offline.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Wheeler. Director Jones?
No additional comments, Chair. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Matters from the committee? None? Good. Matters from the chair? I have nothing either. Our next meeting is Monday, August 8th. Thank you. We are adjourned.